What up, everybody? What up? What up? I love that intro. I think the music, that little whatever he or she is, and the little floating whatever it is. I don't know, man. I love the music. Gets me pumped up. Welcome, everybody. Happy Hump Day Wednesday. Apologize for not being on Monday. We had a couple of scheduling issues, but we appreciate you guys jumping on tonight. It bothers us when we gotta cancel a show. And oftentimes we have the most fun when it's just Charlie and I. And yeah, life gets in the way every so often, and we gotta cancel. We know it. We know a lot of you folks set your schedules around the show, and we love you guys. We appreciate you folks so much. I want a special shout out tonight, Auntie Dane. I saw her name pop up on the list. Auntie Dane, I hope you're recovering well. Auntie Dane got into a horrific car accident over here. Not even her fault. And she's recovering on Oahu for quite a while now. So, everyone, prayers for Auntie Dane. She's a true villager. She has, I don't think she's ever missed a show, to be honest, prior to the accident. And she makes it a she makes that effort to get on, especially when you have excellent guests like we do tonight. Also to my pops from Seattle, all the way in Seattle, another loyal, faithful villager, as many of you are. If I would read all the names of you, we would take up the whole hour. So you guys warm our hearts whenever you guys are on, and we appreciate you guys, and we really enjoy doing this for y'all. You know, um, Wednesdays are the big day, right? Wednesdays is the big day for the numbers coming out from the state, and it's almost like deja vu. If you watch this show often, it comes at no surprise. The problem is that we'll talk about this tonight once we get the two doctors on. The no one is relaying the information as it should be, which has been the problem for quite a while now. And I saw the graphics. Cases are coming down, positivity rates are coming down, but we had 15 deaths last week. 15. So if you want to go celebrate, you might want to go put yourself in the shoes of the loved ones of these 15 people that passed away. It's so insensitive when you downplay such a serious virus, and you, as Dr. Altenberg mentioned last week, right? He thought that the peak was gonna, or that the wave was gonna start to slowly decrease. The problem is the indicators are always lagging: hospitalizations and deaths, right? Oh, 16. I'm sorry, Liz. 16 deaths. Ugh. The 16 families that have lost loved ones. So I don't know how you can even try to say that we're doing better when the numbers of deaths are increasing. So we'll keep on plugging away, and we'll keep on bringing the experts. And our audience gets the live audience gets smaller every week, but the post show viewership is still up there. And um, our main focus is getting the message out, whether it's live, whether it's the replay, whether it's we just want the information to get out to the general public. And you can all help by hitting that share button. I mean, that's so simple to do, and get this information, especially information like we'll have tonight, because it's so vital. Uh, I don't know about you folks, but all I know is right now, at this moment, I have several very close friends that are struggling with COVID. I don't know if I'm the magnet. I don't know if it seems like maybe I know a lot of people, but these are close, dear friends, not casual acquaintances, that are not well, that are struggling with COVID. Are they in the hospital? No. Um, One of my dear friends has pneumonia. She's battling COVID, and now it has turned into pneumonia, and she's still at home. So she's not counted anywhere. She's not on anybody's spreadsheet. I guess I hope you're getting what I'm trying to say is You can look at these fluffed up numbers all you want, but the reality, and I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe I know a lot of people, but I think all of you are seeing the same thing. And if it's not those that are struggling and suffering with COVID right now, it's those that are struggling and suffering with long COVID. Those that are this is the health side, and then you get the economy side, right, where people cannot even open their stores or shops or restaurants because they don't have a workforce because they're all home with COVID. But if you watch the news, you start to believe that this is a minor virus. And I think that is my frustration. All these politicians running, all of their commercials, not one mention, not one mention. It's all about everything else, but they've kind of forgotten. I think everyone has kind of, not everyone, but our policymakers, our decision makers, our leaders, so-called leaders, have taken the position that we're not going to do anything else. We are going to let this ride and we'll let it rip through our communities. And if people die, they die. I don't dig that. And it bothers me. It makes me sick to my stomach. Um, I mean, just put an emoji, raise your hand, or whatever you. If you know someone right now that's not doing well because of COVID, I'm just curious to see how many of you. Like, it can't be just me. It cannot be just me. So we'll chat about that tonight. We got two power. It's I feel like I am hosting a a little function with two all-star quarterbacks. That's kind of how I feel tonight, and or a coach that has two all-star quarterbacks. And how do you split the time between two all-stars? That's kind of how I feel tonight, because these two gentlemen tonight, Dr. Lee Altenberg and Dr. Tim Brown, have been digging into this thing from day one. They are two of the most credible people we know as it relates to this pandemic, and I am just thrilled and joyed to be able to have them two on the show at the same time. So I'm going to try to be the coach tonight. We got Dr. Lee in here already. Boom. What's up, Doc?
Aloha.
you know, it just seems like yesterday you were on the show. It was a week ago.
Yeah.
And, and we'll get into this. I'm hoping Tim gets on quick, but I'm hoping that, well, let me just say it. You basically what you said last week is happening this week. What you predicted last week is what we're seeing. But I really wanted to get into the numbers tonight. Really wanted to get into the states, or I should just say our governments, because it's also our counties, their reactions or their non-actions or whatever it may be. But all I know is that 16 people died last week. That's a lot of people. Uh, I remember when I was a cop here in Kauai, and we had the highway in front of the golf course. For some reason or another, we were having fatalities quite often. And it was a 50-mile-an-hour speed zone. It was a two-lane highway. The head-on collisions were happening way too often, and everyone freaked out. And they went into change speed limits, and they went into much more stricter enforcement along that highway, with the cops and doing speed enforcement, because it was an unusual amount of accidents and unusual amount of death. And when you come out with the weekly numbers, and you have, let me bring on Dr. Brown because he just popped in. When we release the numbers, and the focus is on the decreasing case counts and the decreasing positivity rates, but to me the largest or the most uh, important information, I think the biggest number for me was the death. So anyway, welcome, Dr. Brown.
Hey guys.
I almost want to just take myself out of the screen and have you two just talk story, like over some coffee or tea or something. And I just want to be a sponge and absorb. Charlie's out working tonight.
Tell Charlie to stop working so much.
I told him, man. I told him. He had his family visit over the weekend, and he was surprised. And So he had some good time off, but yeah, we got to tell him to stop working, man. Stop working. He real quick before we get into the meat and potatoes, his job required him to go through these online, or it wasn't online, it was done virtually, but it was a live training for 2 days. The training originated out of the East Coast. It was a required training with a test at the end. It's almost like college. But because of the time difference, his class started at 3:45
Oh,
a.m. Hawaii
oh,
time. Yeah, yeah. I'm like, okay, Charlie, you the man. You the man. So anyway, all right. So I don't know even know where to start. Let's start with the numbers. Let's start with the numbers. And who wants to take a shot at the numbers? Today's report. And where do we go from here? What are we doing?
so I've got some
Hey.
slides of the current
Oh,
numbers.
all
How about you,
right.
Tim?
I don't have any slides. Just
Okay.
ready to chat.
Tim.
Okay. So I can bring this up here.
Go ahead,
Should
my
I
friend.
put up? Okay. Here we go.
Dr.
Tell me
Brown
if
has
you.
that look on his face like he's not a happy camper. Like the coffee isn't hot, it's cool, it's warm. Or it's Mountain Dew. I'm not sure what it
Just
is.
concerned.
There we go, the Mountain Dew. See, I got you guys pegged already. All right, Doc.
Okay. So there's the daily cases in Hawaii from day one of the pandemic, and so you can see. Do you see my cursor moving?
Yeah.
So
Yes, we can.
there's the the Delta wave. There's the BA1 wave. Here is the BA2 wave, and that's the peak of it. That was about 2 weeks ago, and so you can see this peak of these case numbers. This was like about twice the peak of the Delta wave, and but you can see that clearly there's a pattern of coming down now, and we can look more. Um, a way I like to look at the shape of the curves is to take the case numbers and divide them by the case numbers of the previous week. All right. So there's this big, if you see this zigzag here, this zigzag is from the days of the week. So some days have a lot of tests, others don't. One way you can deal with that is just to average them out over 7 days. But a different way is to take the ratio 1 week to 7 days earlier. And here is the plot going back to November, and each of these lines is the different counties. So this interesting one, this yellow line, this was Honolulu County, and this was the BA1 wave. That was just called Omicron there because there was only one Omicron. Subsequently, there's like son of Omicron, bride of Omicron. There's all these different family members. So they're called BA2 is what we've got now over here. So this was the BA1 wave. And this is not the actual numbers. This is the week-to-week ratio. So when it hits 1, that means it was the same 1 week as the previous week. So that corresponds to a peak. And so during this is the time it was growing fastest. And then they all peaked about the same time. And then when it drops below 1, that means the case numbers are coming down. And they did that until late March. And then this was, again, the ratio is 1. So this was the trough. This was when the case numbers hit the bottom. And then they started coming up again. And so they were fastest growing from week to week in late April, when they were, about 2.5 times every week. The numbers were 2.5 times the previous week. But then you can see a definite pattern of them falling down. And now they've hit 1 again, and they've dropped below 1, which means that we are past this peak and the case numbers are declining now. But what's notable here, so this was the peak of the BA1 wave. And when these numbers hit the peak, they were going down pretty fast. And so that peak crashed very quickly. And we can see that up here. I mean, it hit these huge numbers and then came way down very quickly. But with our BA2 wave, it's much flatter here. And that means the case numbers are not falling that rapidly. They're maintaining this high level, this near peak level, much more prolonged. So you can see that this is a broader peak than the BA1 wave. So it's hard to know how fast these numbers are going to come down to the previous trough levels. And this is again looking at these different waves. I can skip the details of that. So I mean, the question is, well, how long is it going to be till we get to low numbers? Well, we don't know. It could be a month, or could be longer. Now, this is this very interesting source of data, which is this e-thermometer company, the smart thermometer company called Kinza, and their fever thermometers report in from around the country, and this is what they're reporting in terms of severity from around the country. And here in red, in the most severe levels, are Alaska and Hawaii. We're doing much worse case number by thermometers in people's homes than to the. So here, their panel, Hawaii, we've actually gotten worse than last week. It was at 75. It's gone up to 81 today. And we can look at, particularly look at Kauai, it's up at 90. So that means there's a lot of people with these thermometers on Kauai that have fevers right now that are reporting them to their central data collection. So I don't know why Kauai is so bad.
Hey, Doc, can you go back up to the slide? Keep going. One more.
This one?
One more. Okay, this one. And I noticed, and I think you mentioned a little bit about that, but the width of the surge.
Yeah.
You got the delta, which was somewhat wide, and then Omicron or BA1 or BA whatever BA1 went up quick but came down quick. Why is BA2 taking a much longer? It's a much more slower progressing surge or graph than the BA1 and the Delta.
Boy, that's a good question. I would guess that it didn't overshoot as greatly as the BA1 wave did. So in other words, you reach a certain level where the virus starts to run out of susceptible people, and then the numbers start to come down again. So that's here, and at a very high rate of infection, you're driving really fast down the highway, and your gas tank is getting empty, and so you run out faster. That would be my way of saying it. Whereas the BA2 wave doesn't seem to have overshot quite as far. Maybe Tim Brown has some more perspective on what makes a flatter peak than a more steep peak.
Nothing specific. I mean, one factor would be just the fact that our cases are only a fraction of what's actually out there. Although taking a ratio here, that shouldn't affect it that much. But, certainly we all, I think, pretty firmly believe that the cases are underreported by a factor of probably 5 to 7. Something of that sort, which means that in reality, this peak was probably just as high as the original BA1 peak was. And, and that's certainly reflected. I think, if you talk to people in the community right now, everybody's got people sick out at work. I mean, East-West Center, we got through the last 2 years with virtually no cases. We're seeing cases occurring on a fairly regular basis now within the center. So, there's a real concern, I think, that this is much worse. I mean, and, it's one of the things I pointed to on Spotlight on Monday. It's that we are seeing economic impacts of this, and the businesses are in some cases unable to keep staffed. Our hospitals are having problems with a lot of healthcare workers being out sick, and that's reducing their capacity basically to deal with the issues. So, I mean, we're trying to act like nothing's going on here, and the reality is we're probably in one of the worst surges that Hawaii has seen. And I think the one thing that your thermometer map shows is, yes, we are the worst place in the country. We are number one on the New York Times list again. And in fact, we even merited special mention in their graphs. We now have a separate Hawaii curve in their regional graphs because they put the state with the highest numbers on the regional graph as well. And relative to the regional numbers, we are twice as high as all of the regions in the country. So we have by far one of the worst COVID epidemics in the country right now. And yet we are sitting on our hands and doing absolutely nothing. We're not encouraging people to mask, at least not very vocally. The governor goes on Spotlight last week and says, yeah, wear a mask. But we're not seeing regular messaging on that. We're not seeing a big emphasis on there's a lot of COVID in the community, really ought to be careful. Our hospitalizations, IEMA shows them coming down. The HHS numbers show them maybe starting to flatten out a bit. But again, we are in a pretty severe epidemic right now, and we're acting like nothing's going on. And that's the problem I've got. Acting like nothing's going on doesn't keep people from getting sick. And it doesn't keep people from long COVID. It doesn't protect or avoid the long-term impacts that COVID can have on people. The potential for organ damage going forward, the cardiovascular problems, the immune system problems. All of these things that can come, in some cases, even from a mild COVID infection. And so it is really foolish that we are acting like nothing's going on in our communities when, in fact, we've got a rampant epidemic. And in fact, the worst rampant epidemic in the United States of America. We're number one. So I don't care what the political ads are telling you about Hawaii being the lowest state in the country. They're wrong. Hawaii is now the highest state in the country, bar none. And we are significantly above the next highest state.
Yeah, they're not just wrong; they're lying, and that's what bothers me. Dr. Altenberg, there was a question about the thermometer. Can you explain how these things work? I mean, where are these thermometers located, and how is this? Is these like thermometers at the airport, or are these thermometers at home, or how does this clearinghouse get access to these readings?
All right, so I don't have one of these myself, but I think you just buy it like a smartphone or a Fitbit. It's kind of like one of those things, and you buy this thermometer, and it reports its data just like your cell phone apps send data off to the various app owners. Your Fitbit sends it off to the cloud, whatever. And so it's people with these thermometers in their homes, and they take their temperature, and it sends the result off to the company. That's as best as I understand it. So I don't know how much these things cost. I certainly don't have one. I just have your good old fashioned kind, and but that's how it's working. And so it's very interesting. So it's real time, and it's picking up data independently of any agency. So I think it's a good extra stream of data. That's Hawaii. So it went up from 75 to 81 this past week. Kauai is not doing well. It's the worst of the islands. The best is Hawaii. Here's hospitalizations. So this is going back to the Delta wave. So that was our worst hospitalizations. Now, if you remember, when Omicron first started coming out, a lot of the pundits said it's mild, and they actually went as far as to say that hospitalizations will be decoupled from cases. All right, when you say decoupled, I imagine like a caboose losing its connection to the end of a train and the rest of the train driving off and leaving the caboose there. But this peak shows the Omicron wave, the BA1 wave. The hospitalizations were almost as bad as the Delta wave. And so this was anybody who, anybody who said that it was going to be so mild that cases and deaths would cases would be decoupled from hospitalizations and deaths, that they were selling you, as they say, hopium. They were COVID minimizers. They were just trying to paint a pretty narrative, some kind of a happy romance movie ending. And that's not what the reality turned out to be. And here is our hospitalizations. Not as steep. So this is, you can see the Delta and the Omicron BA1 waves were very steep. This has been a more gradual rise, but it's reached half the level of the Omicron wave. And it looks like 2 days after, it looks like about Friday of last week is when it hit this peak, and it looks like it's definitely come down. So we'll see what happens with this trend. I mean, as you can see, there's a certain amount of bumpiness, but there seems to be coming down, and this is about on schedule, given that the peak was about 3 weeks ago, and so the hospitalizations are lagging by 2 to 3 weeks. Now, the issue that Dr. Brown brought up about how many cases we actually have now compared to how they used to get measured, because the use of the home test means they're not getting reported. So I've mentioned this in previous visits here, is that if you can actually make an estimator of the case numbers based just on the positivity rates, and training it on this period here up to the Omicron wave, you can see it's actually a very accurate estimator. So the blue is the actual case numbers, and this orange is the estimated case numbers based solely on the positivity rate. And you can see when the Omicron wave hits, the positivity goes up and the estimator follows it very closely. Now, there was 2 weeks here where the system was overwhelmed, and so there was no estimates of positivity. And actually in the database, they come out to 1, so that's why it drives off the chart. But then when it comes back in again, the estimator is following closely the case numbers. But then here in March, these two curves now dramatically split ways. So the blue is the reported case numbers, and the orange is the case numbers that it should have been, that would be estimated based on the previous experience. And so this shows that indeed the estimate, this is consistent with what Dr. Brown said, that the current cases here, they look to be about 4 times, these estimates are 4 times the reported cases. And so if this were in fact a realistic estimate of the case numbers, then it is indeed comparable to the BA1 wave in January. So now because people that go get the reported tests, the PCR tests, a lot of them may have done it because they turned positive on the home test. That would up the fraction of tests that are positive. And so that this might be excessive because of that. And so the real numbers are probably somewhere in between. But as you can see, they're in any case, they outstrip the Delta wave by at least twice, and it's somewhere in the same ballpark as the BA1 wave. And here is the other thing that Dr. Brown mentioned, that we're the worst in the country right now in terms of the infections per capita. And so here is the ratio of the per capita cases between Hawaii and the United States. So this line, this green line here, is when Hawaii is as bad as the US. When it drops below the green line, that's when Hawaii is doing much better. When it goes above the green line, that's when Hawaii is doing worse. And we can see that early in the pandemic, there was a little period of time when Hawaii was doing worse than the country. And then it did worse in the Delta wave, and it did worse in the Omicron wave. And it's done much worse in this BA2 wave. And as you can see right now, we're about 1.5 times the infection case rate per capita as the mainland United States. So indeed, something happened here. Now this orange line is the end of the mask mandate, and so this bad period here commenced after that, the end of that mask mandate. So it's hard, it's impossible to prove if it contributed to that, but at least it's consistent. So we've got a long way to go to get our case numbers down before we're on the average of the rest of the country. So that's all my slides.
Yeah, so come to Hawaii, bring home COVID. You don't just get a crappy T-shirt anymore. You also get an infection to take home. Yeah, I think what Dr. Altenberg just pointed out is exactly the problem here. We're acting like nothing's going on. I actually think there's probably a pretty reasonable explanation as to why our spike of BA1 in January, February was so sharply peaked, whereas this current one is much more broadly peaked. And it has to do with the mask mandate. With the mask mandate, as long as people were wearing masks, we actually probably burned through the susceptibles a lot faster. Without the mask mandate, we have a huge susceptible population. In fact, a lot of the people who were being really cautious for the first couple of years, well, they've dropped their masks now foolishly, and they're in the susceptible pool now, which means they can get infected. The other problem we've got now is also that our protections are waning. We haven't really expanded boosting at all. Vaccines, we know, wane fairly quickly. Within 5 months, you basically have no protection from your vaccines against infection from Omicron. The new Omicron variants that are coming out are also more immune evasive. So that's another factor making more people susceptible. And even if you had natural infections before, they're not necessarily that protective going forward. In fact, the data is showing that if you had a relatively mild Omicron BA1 infection, it probably doesn't give you that much protection going forward against the new variants that are coming out now, like BA2.12.1, which is a pretty significant player here in the islands. So, there's a whole lot of things that are playing out in the background, all of which are making us more susceptible. And that's what really concerns me right now.
Yeah, I think it concerns all of us that are concerned, right? There's a lot of people that aren't. I think every day that goes by, you get more people that are comfortable with relaxing the safety protocols, and it's sad and it's a shame. I did want to make a point where you talked about the hospitalizations, and before you came, I'm not sure if Dr. Lee was in the green room when I was talking about my friend who's at home right now struggling. Uh, she had a horrible bout with COVID, and now it's pneumonia. Um, you see, back in July or prior to July, I have no doubt she would have been admitted to the hospital. Right now, and that's what bothers me. And Raina just said she's a nurse. She said Kauai it is a rural area with very limited resources. Healthcare workers are being affected. Can we get federal funding to assist, ultimately to help others? Good question. Sounds like the feds have kind of dried them up. State said, hey, because we don't have funding anymore, we cannot really do what we were doing, which is one of the worst excuses I've ever heard in my life. But my point is that hospitalizations, COVID hospitalizations, I think what we're seeing is a patient with COVID that was suffering from lung issues or breathing issues back then was admitted right away. And now, because of the hospital capacities are filled, even if it's not majority COVID patients, patients that would normally have been admitted are now being forced to try to recover at home. And that is real. And that's what's happening. I mean, my own experience, I got booted from the hospital early because they needed the bed. So again, I call this collateral damage of the COVID pandemic. And because of that, we're seeing more people being forced to have to self-treat at home and isolate because there's just no available beds. unless you're in really, really bad shape. I'm not sure if you're seeing that. That's just my observation. It's definitely not scientific, but that's what I'm seeing.
Well, I know that I'm hearing from the doctors, that recently they've been seeing less pneumonia, uh, which is a good thing, and that probably reflects the fact that Omicron tends to infect more the upper airways than the lungs. But that's where the next real concern comes. So let me show a few slides and throw something into the mix here. Let me set this up real quick. Okay, can I try and share some slides?
Yep, go ahead.
I lied. I actually made some slides. Let's see. I can only share. Okay, window. That's what I'm looking for. There we go. Okay. Uh, can you put those up in the window, Mel? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Dr. Altenberg was mentioning that, well, we don't quite know what it's coming down, but I got a simple way of trying to predict these things. You take the curve on the rise, you flip it over, and then you see what it looks like on the fall. And so I did exactly that. Took the curve up to the peak here, from around here up to there. Then I flipped it around 180 degrees. And then basically you can see it's actually replicating the darker blue here you can see is basically the previous trend. And so basically, according to this, we'd be around mid-July before we start to get down to lower levels again, which I think is about what we can expect. But there's a wild card in this mix. For just $9.95, I'm going to throw in BA4 and BA5. And those have the potential to basically totally change the game once again. Something we've heard of with COVID before. This particular virus has a really nasty characteristic of throwing curves at us that we basically fail to anticipate, even though they're staring us in the face. We saw that with Delta. We saw that with Omicron. Come on. I was screaming about Delta back in April, long before a Delta wave ever hit here, but, nobody wanted to hear it. And we were screaming about Omicron a month ahead. But again, people were, let's not worry about it. No, we're lifting all our restrictions anyway. We don't care that the virus is coming. But let's talk about BA4 and BA5, because those are in the islands right now. Countries where BA4 and BA5 are taking over in Europe right now are all seeing rising trends. Okay, so you can see in the last couple of weeks, Israel, Singapore, France, Austria, Switzerland, Belgium, Ireland, Denmark, Netherlands, United Kingdom, all of them are on an upward rise in terms of number of cases now. They are also just seeing the start of a rise in hospitalizations. Surprise, surprise. And this actually shows you what the proportion of BA4 and BA5 in the different countries looks like. So you can see it's actually growing fairly rapidly as a proportion of all the viruses in the country at this point in time. So, do we have to worry about this here? Well, I would recommend it, because this is the variant report that just came out today. This is the variant circulating in Honolulu County as of the end of June, or I should say at the beginning of June, June 4th. This last bar represents the 2 weeks preceding June 4th. You see these little things down here? That 5% number in Honolulu County? That's BA4 and BA5. And you just mentioned Kauai. So at no additional expense, I'm going to throw in Kauai for you. That's BA5, 5%. And this was 2 weeks ago, the 2 weeks preceding June 4th, which was 2 weeks ago. So we are probably now at 10 to 15% BA4 and BA5, at least on Oahu and on Kauai. Now, why is that concerning? I don't have, and also I should point out, other thing that we're seeing, Kauai is the one country or one county where I can actually get wastewater data. This is the wastewater data for Kauai. Notice it is now rising again. Okay, it had fallen. Now it's back up again on the rise. And my suspicion is that's probably related to BA5 starting to spread there. Cautionary tale. This is Ireland. Why do I point to Ireland? because it's an interesting country when you compare it with us. It's a country with about 5 million people, so it's about 3 times our population. Its pattern of the epidemic looks very much like ours. Back in January, February, they had this huge BA1 spike. They had this smaller BA2 spike in the reported cases, but I'm sure they're suffering from the same underreporting problem we are. And just in the last couple of weeks, they've started to see a rise in BA4, BA5. Okay, but what's been going on here? Well, this is their hospitalizations. At the time of the BA1 spike, they weren't getting all that many hospitalizations comparatively. This was the Delta spike before that, over here on the cases and here on the hospitalizations. This was the BA1 spike, not as many hospitalizations. BA1 was a less severe form of COVID. I refuse to say the word mild because it will still kill you. The BA2 spike, even though it's smaller, did produce more hospitalizations in Ireland. But again, the smaller is a relative thing because, like Dr. Altenberg was just showing, this is probably really up here somewhere. But what's really scary, you see this little rise in BA4, BA5 here? Well, look what's happening with hospitalizations in Ireland. They're shooting through the roof. I mean, they are in a rapid rise, and this is basically what's causing it. This is BA4 and BA5, this blue stuff here. And this is basically the proportion of variants of different types. Okay, so the blue here is BA4, BA5. They've now become dominant in Ireland, and we are seeing the hospitalizations going up. Why do I worry about this? Because BA4 and BA5, we have serious concerns that they may be more severe. Portugal, which is the first country in Europe where BA5 started to take off, has seen steadily rising death rates. And in fact, their death rates are now as high as they've been since the initial spike in the country, even higher than they were during the Delta spike. Their hospitalizations seem to have leveled off and are maybe dropping a little bit, but nonetheless, the mortality is continuing to rise in Portugal. We have a number of studies which have found, well, let me say 2 key findings from those studies. Number 1, BA4, BA5 are more immune evasive than any variant that has come before. They avoid immunity due to previous variants. They avoid immunity due to vaccines much better than the previous Omicron variants did. If you had a BA1 infection back in January, February, you probably have virtually no protection from BA4, BA5 due to that infection, or due to that BA1 infection previously. Okay, so they are much more immune escape. Also, remember, our vaccines, most of us are even 4 or 5 months out from our boosters. I think I got my booster back in October or something. I mean, ages ago. And so, we are talking basically a waning immunity in our community as a whole. Not much protection from past infections. And even if you had your past infection further back than that, a Delta infection or something, you're going to have very little protection against infection due to that. So we are very susceptible to infection with BA4 and BA5. And if they in fact turn out to be more severe, and the jury is still out on this, okay, but like I say, this type of hospitalization rise that we are seeing in Ireland is extremely concerning. Something similar was seen in Portugal, because that indicates that they are producing more severe illness and sending more people to the hospitals. And the other reason I'm concerned, the second key finding with BA4 and BA5, in addition to immune escape, is that there are at least 2 separate animal studies now which have found that they are more likely to infect lung tissue than the previous Omicron variants. And infecting lung tissue is basically what made the early variants, including Delta, more deadly. And so BA4 and BA5 have to be watched very, very closely. They clearly have the potential to reverse the hospitalization picture and put us into a very nasty place from the point of view of hospitalizations. And we do have to be concerned about whether or not they infect lung tissue more easily. If they do, then we're going to be seeing more severe COVID cases. And that's where I worry a little bit about what Mel just said about his friend having pneumonia. because what I was hearing with the current Omicron variants from some of my doctor friends in the hospitals was that pneumonia was getting to be increasingly rare. So it's a little concerning there, especially given that BA.5 does seem to be circulating on the Garden Isles. So I think there are a number of issues here with BA.4 and BA.5 coming that may completely alter that landscape. So that a pretty picture I showed of this thing coming down mildly, it may not last. If we follow the pattern in Europe with BA.4 and BA.5 spreading rapidly around the islands, we're going to see those numbers start to come up. So,
Doc,
that's where it
and
is.
for either one of you, across the world, what is the typical period of time between BA1, BA2, and BA4 and BA5? As this BA1, BA2 starts to slow down, what can we expect, or when can we expect? I know these things, it starts slow. When I look at the charts on the variant reports, the first couple of reporting periods, which is what, a week or 2 weeks, it's kind of gradual, and then it just starts to go. And it really, because this virus is so contagious, and I understand BA4, BA5 is more contagious as well. But any estimates on when we should be seeing the impacts of BA4, BA5, and when we'll start seeing that surge, or that line in the graph start to climb again?
Actually, I've got some data I can show. Oh, there we go. Okay. So,
yeah, I'm on it, guys. I'm on it, man.
So Walgreens has a really interesting dashboard in that. So they are doing PCR tests on people, and their PCR tests can detect what's called S gene dropout or S gene target failure. So there's like 3 little pieces of sequence of RNA sequence that the PCR test lights up when somebody is positive. But in the case of BA4 and 5, one of those little fragments doesn't light up. And that was the same as the BA1, the Omicron variant back in January, is that it also was missing that S gene dropout. And what's interesting is the BA2 that we're just peaking at didn't have the S gene dropout. So when somebody's positive, all 3 fragments would light up in the PCR machine. And so that's what they call that the stealth Omicron, because you couldn't tell it was Omicron based on that dropout, but you could definitely detect it. Some people mistakenly thought the stealth variant of Omicron, you couldn't detect it. No, you couldn't. It's absolutely detectable, but you couldn't tell it from Delta. So, but now the S gene dropout has reappeared in BA4 and 5, and so you can track it. And so here's this red line is the S gene dropout as a fraction of the test that Walgreens runs. And you can see now the levels started going up in May. So this is the percentage. And now they're approaching 50%, which means if this is really indicative of what's going on in the country, that BA4 and 5 have now reached about 50% of all the cases in the country. Now I've got another a more granular slide. Let me see. How do I guess to switch slides, how do I do that?
Just switch it on your, however you want to do it. We're showing your computer screen right now, so whatever you
decide. All right, let me discontinue that and then start it again. And okay, here we go.
Yeah, you while you're getting that thing set up, you cannot help but wonder, like, does our Department of Health, does our state consult with people like you folks? Do they actually look at charts, or do they just choose to ignore it, or are they seeing this and just decided not to share it with the public, not to warn the public? I'm not sure.
I'm not privy to what they're doing.
I'm sure Dr. Brown will have a comment on that. But go ahead, Dr. Lee.
Okay, so this is data from different states on the fraction of the different variants. Actually, no, this is not fraction. This is actual cases of the different variants in each different state. And so this red line here, this is the BA2 wave that we've just gone through, and the the blue line is the BA1, and coming up here from the rear is BA4, the green line here, and BA5, the yellow line. And we see that this yellow line is the steepest, okay? And we can look at different states and look what's happening with this yellow line. So this is the fastest growing one, is the one that has the steepest curve here. And we can see that by far at the present, it's BA5. And so BA5 is shooting up. And here's the actual growth rate per day, 0.12. That's huge. That's like a 1 week doubling time. Okay, and so this is Florida. Here's Massachusetts. So we can see that the height of these curves compared to the old variants differs between the state, probably depending on when the variant arrived there and started to grow. But in every case, the rate of growth of BA5 is really tremendous, and and it's shooting straight up. So this is what our future. This is telling us. This is our crystal ball about what the immediate future is showing. Here's now look. North Dakota doesn't even show it on the map on North Dakota. So because they are more remote from the international travel lines, they probably just didn't get established there. And Hawaii is not on this set of graphs, unfortunately. Here's Virginia. Here's Washington. So we see the same story in state after state with BA5, and here's California. So and this is a little delayed, so it's not up to the present that graph from Walgreens was, which is real time. So, but what it says is that BA5 is really hurtling in its exponential growth. And so, based on this, I would say we're not going to get very far down that BA2 curve before BA5 rears its ugly head.
My turn.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you want that chart up, Doc?
Yeah, I've got to share. Okay. Thank you. Okay, this is.
That's really scary, Dr. Lee. That's quite. Again, that's quite scary. What you just showed us.
I'm going to add on to what he just said. Okay, this is the latest CDC data on variants within the United States. And you can see BA4, BA5 are making their play. I mean, they're at basically 35% of all the sequenced cases in the United States right now. And as you can see, looking at these bottom green things, that's an exponential growth curve again. So they are well on their way to kind of pushing the other guys over to the side. Now, I expect BA 2.12.1 to hold on for a while. So we may end up with a situation where we're about 50-50 in a couple of weeks. But eventually, I think these guys are probably going to win out. And just to follow on what Dr. Altenberg just put up for the Walgreens, I pulled the same graph from the Walgreens subvariant trend tracker for Hawaii. Okay? So, yeah, a lot noisier than the federal or the national graph is. But the green here is going to be BA2. This red stuff coming up is going to be that exact same S gene dropout we were just talking about. And that's not looking very pretty right now. And when you combine that with the fact that as of June 4th, we were seeing 5% BA4 or BA5 on both Oahu and Kauai, they're growing pretty fast here too. We don't have the solid data to show it, but we certainly get an indication here and in the latest variant report that they are spreading pretty quick here. So it may not be too long till we see them start to interrupt that decline that we're seeing in the BA2 wave. And that's it. Now I'm totally out
Wonderful,
of graphs.
wonderful. That's like, oh, I don't know what to tell you. We've always said from day one that the playbook was already written. Yeah, we have the advantage in our state. We have the advantage because it affects everywhere else before we get to see it. We also have the advantage of being able to control these these variants coming into our state because we have such a wonderful scenario set up with the Pacific Ocean. Um, and yet we don't take advantage of these advantages, and we allow these variants to come in. A lot of those states that you showed on the graphs. I don't know how many of them have 30,000 or 40,000
Hmm.
travelers, visitors, I should say, coming into their state in such a concentrated area. I mean, those states are huge. They're spread out. They're not condensed like our islands. So when you talk about infusing 40,000 possible carriers or percentage of those people bringing in these variants, we have a lot of international travelers coming into our state on a daily basis. And they've come across, so they drop a little bit of virus off in New York, and then they'll drop some maybe in California, and then drop some in Hawaii, and then go home. uh, I have a feeling that this next surge that we see, and we will see it. I mean, you just showed us the trends, and again, those things aren't politically. They don't. They're not politically motivated. They're just data and facts. That we're going to see, I think, a pretty bad BA4 BA5 experience in the next couple months, based on what I'm seeing. I mean, is that right? Am I on the right page?
I think it
And
is.
what
I mean, every place else is seeing BA4, BA5 take off, is seeing resurgence in cases and increases in hospitalizations. So it's coming. I mean, exactly, how severe it will end up being, we don't know right now. And that's what I worry about. Here we are, we're in the same situation we were in with Omicron in early December, right? We knew it was coming. We did not know at that point how severe it was. And yet we threw all caution to the winds and we lifted every restriction in the state except the mask mandate on December 1st. I mean, it was a friggin' disaster. The train is coming straight for you. And basically, instead of trying to hit the brakes, you basically hit the accelerator. I mean, we are doing the same thing again right now. We're going into this. We know it's coming. It's already here. We know it's 5% on Oahu and on Kauai right now of the cases that we've sequenced, which is not that large a number of cases. The Walgreens data is showing us that it's probably already starting to take off and becoming pretty significant here. We don't know its severity at this point, and yet all I hear is crickets on the part of our leaders and Department of Health in terms of telling us what we should be doing. We should be out there telling people, look, we've got a very severe epidemic in the community right now. We have BA4, BA5 potentially coming. Wear your mask, please. And wear a high quality mask. Get an N95. Because right now, in the absence of any information, people are assuming nothing's going on. They're not getting the message because nobody's giving it to them. The media barely covers this stuff anymore, except for, Nina kind of putting out her stories when the stuff comes out on Wednesdays. But, it rarely even makes the evening news anymore. And so people are not aware of what's going on here. And we're basically potentially heading into a really nasty situation should the severity of BA4 and BA5 look like what we're seeing in the animal models. If we are seeing more infection of lung tissue in the animal models, if that ends up holding up in humans, and we don't know that yet, but if it does, then our hospitals may be in real trouble again. And in that when you've got enough information that says it may be more severe, it probably is going to produce a pretty substantial wave, you should be taking precautions at that point, not just throwing all caution to the winds and saying, well, let's let this one rip like we let the other ones rip. I mean, it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, and especially not knowing, what to expect because we don't know yet. It's too soon, and I think that's the frustration, right? Because they know what they need to do to protect the people. And I know a lot of people would get pissed off if they reinstated the indoor mask mandate. I see there was a time not long ago that you went into the store or anywhere you went, a lot of people were still wearing masks. That's not the case anymore. Not here on Kauai anyway. More people are not wearing masks now, and the messaging is definitely absent. And this is the scary part about this virus, regardless of which variant. When we if we wait until it's bad, then it's too late, right? Because we all know about the lagging indicators. So if we implement safety protocols when we realize, oh shit, it's here, then 2 3 weeks from now, you see the impacts. You see the hospitalizations and the deaths, and that is why I don't understand why we are not doing more now, as we know this is on the horizon. Why aren't we not starting to protect our people now and implement? I mean, how difficult is an indoor mask mandate? How inconvenient is that if it's gonna, you know, keep that curve from spiking so high, and only to find our loved ones in the hospital 3 weeks later? I don't get it. And you're right. You only hear the little blurb on Wednesdays. Tonight's blurb was about how the cases are coming down. That was the blurb. Dr. Lee?
Well, the framework in terms of drawing on history, what are the examples that we have to draw upon about how society deals with things? And the one that comes to my mind is World War II. All right, that was an all of society effort to defeat the Axis powers. And they didn't, after 2 years of fighting, they didn't just say, well, we're going to have to learn to live with the Nazis, and we're not going to let the Nazis rule our lives anymore. And we have the tools we need to deal with the Nazis. And then we pull our troops out of Europe and see what happens. So, we're in a war with this virus that wants to parasitize our bodies and turn our bodies into virus factories. All right. That's its goal. And it's doing it to a huge fraction of the population and making a lot of people seriously ill and a lot of people ruining their health for who knows how long in myriad different ways. And it seemed that there was this narrative that became dominant once the vaccines were out. Well, first of all, there was a narrative that the vaccines are here and they are going to end the pandemic. And the problem is that the virus mutated and evolved to evade both prior infection immunity and the vaccine immunity. And our vaccine deployment, our total system has not kept up has not updated the vaccines to match the current variants. So, but once there was this narrative that the high-tech vaccines are going to end the pandemic, and now we've reached a certain fraction of the population, 70% was going to be the key to ending all protections in Hawaii, because the vaccine, now we have this wall of immunity protecting us. And so then when the Omicron wave hit, and we didn't have any more, basically we didn't have any more weapons to deploy. And so I think there was this mental framework of, well, we've given it everything we've got, and when do we get to go back to living as we used to live? And if not now, after we've given it all, we have the Paxlovid, we have the vaccine. When do we get to go back to normal? And there was just a decision, well, if not now, when? And so they said, all right, we're just going to go back to normal and get rid of all these public health protections. But the Nazis, the virus, didn't get the memo, and it's continuing to succeed in parasitizing the human population. And we're still stuck with this narrative that now we're going to live with COVID, and it's not that bad. And there's diseases. People accepted the flu and the number of deaths from the flu, and so you can't get rid of all deaths, and so We just have to learn to live with the virus. But that's not going to save the people that die, and that's not going to save the people that get long COVID. And so it's simply no longer dealing with reality. You fight the war until the war is over, and the war with this virus is not over. We're getting on to the battle of BA5 now. So the problem is, somewhere in the political equation, the leadership came to believe that they pay a political cost only by having these public health protections, because they irritate some people. As Mel, you said, some people would not be happy for a return to the mask mandate. But if the governor reinstituted it, that would send a message like no brief interview on the TV would, that we are still in serious trouble with this pandemic and we need to defend ourselves. We need to deploy every tool at our hands to defend ourselves from this virus. And I think the problem is, you think, is this how human life is going to be from here on out? And I think it's important to realize that we have only gotten started in terms of vaccine development and potential treatments. And so, what do we have to hold out for? Well, what I'm holding out for is better vaccines that are really going to protect people, that are going to catch up with the variants and maybe even get ahead with the ideas like a nasal or inhaled vaccine that would keep the virus from even getting started in the airways. But I guess my general framework is, we're in a war with this virus. We have to use every tool that we can cost effectively deploy. And our little, so actually I heard that Longs is now giving these N95s, these 3M Aura N95 masks, out free again at the checkout counters. I hope that's true. They were out for quite a while, but I heard that they're giving them out. So when you're at the drugstore at Longs and you're checking out, just ask for one of the N95 masks, and they should give it to you free. This little simple thing is a virus stopper if you approach it competently. And if we had the whole population armed with these, all right, to fight this virus, we would be protecting a lot of people's health. So the governor, when he announced the end of the mask mandate on March 8th, he said that that if there is a surge, that the state is ready to impose the mask policy, and that he said that he was ready to re-implement the mask mandate, but he's not done that. And I really think we should simply, in this case, hold him to his word, because we're still in danger. People are dying, people are getting sick, and the BA5 wave is on its way.
I think, honestly, until we're basically at the point where the hospitals are about to get overwhelmed again, they're not going to react. And by that time, it's going to be too late. So if in fact BA4, BA5 do have the level of severity that we have to be concerned about, then it's probably going to hit us well before we have time to actually prepare. And I think, part of the problem is the politicians in this country, number one, they've destroyed any sense of social solidarity that this country ever had. I think the ongoing wars between Democrats and Republicans, between liberals and conservatives, the attacks on science that occur on a routine basis on places like Fox Network and so on, all of these things have basically not only destroyed social solidarity, but they've also destroyed the ability of science to influence a large number of the people in this country. And that's the problem. The second problem we've got, the politicians have sold this living with COVID means going back to acting like it's not there. And that is not what living with COVID means. Living with COVID means being prepared to mount multiple defenses when it becomes necessary. So when the virus surges in the community, you mask. Keep your vaccines up to date. You streamline the pipelines for treatment and access to drugs, testing, and vaccines such that anybody can get them and everybody gets Paxlovid. Question I've got right now, we're told we have the tools to deal with this. If we have the tools to deal with this, and we know that Paxlovid, in the case of people with risk factors for severe COVID, basically can see their hospitalizations reduced by 80 or 90% by using Paxlovid, why are we in Hawaii sending 100 people to the hospital every week right now? Why are 10 people a week dying on average over the last 10 weeks? If we have these miracle drugs and we're getting them to people, we should not be seeing this. And that is the real problem. What I really want to see, I would really love to see Department of Health. I want an investigation. Follow up those 100 people who are getting hospitalized. Find out, did they get access to Paxlovid? If they did not, find out why not. Was it inability to access a test? Was it lack of knowledge of what was going on? Was it the fact that their doctor wouldn't give them a prescription? He didn't consider them high risk enough? What were the factors that sent those people to the hospital? That's what we need to know. What about those people who died? Find out what were the treatment options that were given to them. Were they offered Paxlovid before they even got hospitalized? If they were not, then our system is failing them, and they died unnecessarily. And that is the problem I've got right now. We've sold this fiction to people that we have the tools, we have the ability to deal with this. And yet a huge portion of our population cannot get access to treatment. A huge portion of our population cannot get access to testing. The freebies are pretty much gone at this point. If you're going to get these things, you're going to have to pay for them yourself because the federal government's no longer supporting any of this. And the state is not really stepping in and filling in that gap. So for a lot of people, money may be the reason that they don't get a test and therefore don't get access to treatment and therefore die or get sick and end up in the hospital with the costs that are associated with that, which if their insurance is not very good, may be enough to break them basically economically for the foreseeable future. So I've got real issues here. We talk about living with COVID, yet we are not giving the people the tools they need to live with COVID. We are not giving them information that they need. Why are we getting 1 week releases of data, and why are our leaders not out there telling people we're in a pandemic situation right now, mask? Because I firmly believe if you explain to the majority of people here in Hawaii, the majority of them would probably be willing to mask right now. We're not stupid. And people in Hawaii have shown a much greater willingness to mask than people in the rest of the United States. But I don't think people are getting that information now. I don't think it's getting out because we've got this cone of silence and to put down over COVID now. And it makes no sense whatsoever. This is ridiculous. We know how to deal with this. Masking in the community could make a huge difference in terms of arresting the transmission of this virus. Streamlining our treatment systems and making sure that anybody can get access to treatment for free, access to testing for free, access to vaccines for free is absolutely essential to make sure that we have equity in healthcare in this country. There is a reason why Pacific Islanders have the highest mortality rates to COVID in this country or in this state. And it is probably related to their lack of access to care and the fact that economically they can't afford the care anymore. I want those issues addressed. I'm sick of sitting here and pushing people over the edge, letting them go to the hospital, letting them die when it's not necessary. And that's what I'm seeing right now. I'm seeing a lack of urgency, a lack of a sense of the need to protect the people of Hawaii, and it infuriates me, obviously.
Well said, Doc. I think all of us, maybe not all of us, but a damn huge percentage of us that are in here right now agree with you 100%. That was the kind of the trade-off, right? In order for the politicians to open up, they had to convince the people that, number one, all of what you just said, that we don't have access to, or many of us don't have access to, they told us that we would. For them to go ahead and allow the big corporate airlines and the industry people to get their way, they have to convince the people. See, if they try to open up in the middle of Delta when so many people were getting sick and dying, there would have been a revolution. But see, now they have already convinced the people in our state that COVID is minor, that it's not bad, it's not dangerous, and that we can live with COVID and we can go back to normal. And if you run around people that you don't know, yeah, maybe wear a mask. They were successful in justifying their irresponsible choice to lift all of the safety measures that we had in place. Even as simple as a mask mandate. But that was how they did it. Now, for them, the egos get in the way. Of course, it's in election time. No politician is talking about COVID. I don't know if you guys noticed that, except for Josh Green, who says we're the best in the country, and he's the hero. Aside from that mention, which is false, no one else is talking about it. No one else. So every day the people get fed this the non-information of how serious this is, and they're going on with their normal lives, and they're going on with their normal lives, and they're getting sick, or they're spreading the virus. And I'm with you, Doc. I'm not happy. And all of you, I said this many shows, you guys all have new an election coming up at your state legislature, because they've gone silent. They've gone underground. They don't even talk about it. But you all have an opportunity to put these people, ask these people their questions. What are your thoughts on COVID? Anybody that tells me that we got to learn to live with it, I wouldn't vote for them. I honestly would not vote for them. Anyone that cannot accept the fact that we have some serious dangers coming our way, I wouldn't vote for them, because that's how they're going to respond should they get elected, and we face these new surges that come up. So it's in our hands, really. It really is in our hands, and that's why I say, folks, tonight we have 101 people watching right now live. By tomorrow, by tonight we'll have close to 1,000. Tomorrow we'll have over 1,000. If we share this, what these two doctors told us tonight needs to be heard by the masses. It's not going to be heard on KHON or KHNL or KITV. It's not. They're not going to let these two guys come on and say the truth. They're not going to do it, because it doesn't go with the agenda of politics. So they're not going to let these guys come on. They let Tim Brown go on every so often for 30 minutes or so. But this show needs to be seen by everyone in our state right now. And that's up to you. As simple as sharing this program, as simple as sharing it. When you see the YouTube link tonight, I'll post a YouTube link tonight on my Facebook page. Share it. They won't get to see all the comments, but they'll get to hear these two brilliant doctors explain to us the truth, not the political side, the scientific side of what we have in store. So, Civil Beat, I don't know, man. I don't know any reporters don't like me, so I don't have any pull with them. If any of you have a reporter, I mean, this to me is the kind of information that needs to be sent out to the masses here in our state, and only people can do that is us, by hitting that little share button. That's all you got to do. Anyway, sorry for venting, guys. I'm going.
Can I throw one?
I definitely want to give you guys an opportunity to close out with some comments, because I already.
Let me do one final slide, Mel. I'll put my slide
Go
up
ahead.
there.
Absolutely.
Put my slides up. Okay. To those politicians who are telling us how great we're doing on COVID, this is the New York Times data from today on state rankings on cases per 100,000. And you will notice of the 50 states, who is number one? Why, it's Hawaii. And we are 21 cases per 100,000 ahead of Florida. Okay? In fact, New York Times likes us so much that they put us on their regional map all by our lonesome. Okay, we stand alone, and look how high we are relative to the rest of the country. Okay, so yeah, if they want to tell you what a wonderful job they're doing, show them these graphs. Okay, and so I'm going to close just by saying, look, people, be safe out there. This thing is rampant in our community right now. BA4, BA5 are on their way, and we do not know the severity that they will have at this point, but you shouldn't assume that it will be mild. Omicron itself, the original BA1, has not proved to be mild. We have 10 people a week dying. We have 100 people a week going to the hospital at this point. Those are not what I would call a mild illness, but they are preventable. And we have the tools. Mask. If you haven't been boosted yet, go get your booster. If you're immunocompromised, go get Evusheld from your doctor. And if your doctor refuses to give you Evusheld, go get another doctor. We have tools that are available. We need to make sure that they're available to you. Talk to your primary care provider. Make sure you've got rapid access to Paxlovid if you need it. Check with them at what they're going to require. Will they do it on a home test, or are they going to require a PCR? Find out what the steps will be for you to access these drugs, because if you're in a high risk category and you basically contract even the so-called mild Omicron variant, you could still find yourself in a very bad way and joining the ranks of the deceased. So prepare for this. You're going to have to take these steps because our leaders are not taking the steps necessary to do that. They're not setting up test and treat centers. They're not making it easy for people to access. And anybody who thinks that our healthcare system is easy to navigate has obviously never dealt with our healthcare system. Okay, so prepare ahead of time so that if you need them, you can get to these drugs and get to them quickly. And that's what I'll close on.
Thanks, Doc. Dr. Altenberg.
Boy, I don't have too much to add to that. I was hoping that Dr. Brown might say a little about this study that just came out from UHERO, the colleagues at UHERO, on the costs of the pandemic to Hawaii. One of the notable things was the high fraction of people that report long COVID symptoms. So this is by far the biggest risk that an individual faces from getting COVID is long COVID, and much greater probability than sending to the hospital or dying. And it's important to keep in mind, this is not a cold. This virus starts in the respiratory tract, but then it gets into the bloodstream and it goes throughout the whole body, and it can attack various tissues. More and more is being discovered that it can cause persistent infection, and they find it like in the gastrointestinal tissues months later. So it's still a tremendously unknown disease, and the fact that it can attack the brain should really raise red flags. And the amount of people in that UHERO study that said they have brain fog is really alarming. So I'm hoping that in a future show you might get somebody to talk in the details about this new study. We are basically, I guess the take home is this is a disease that's been unknown to humanity before, and we don't know all of its treacheries. And I think it should be treated with the utmost respect, and protect yourself if no one else will.
Wow. Yeah, I think tonight was probably one of the most impacting. People who want more long COVID info can check out my Spotlight Hawaii on Monday. Dr. Brown is going to be on Spotlight Hawaii on Monday.
No, I was on Spotlight.
Oh,
that's 2 days ago.
I just saw you on there. I'm thinking, wow, you're going back. They must really like you.
But we did talk about long COVID there, and we touched on the Hawaii report. So
if you did not watch Spotlight, go to the Honolulu Star Advertiser Facebook page and go back and watch Dr. Brown's Spotlight on Monday. It was actually pretty entertaining.
But I agree. I would really recommend, Mel, that you do an episode in the future and try to get one of the people who's with one of the long COVID clinics that we have on the island. There's one at Straub and there's one at Queens. It'd be really valuable, I think, to get one of the docs there.
Out and make the connection, I'd appreciate it.
Can you check with John? John can probably make the connection for you. John Dworkin.
John who?
Dworkin.
Oh, okay.
You know John.
Yeah. So, I mean, guys, listen, as I just said, first of all, thanks, docs. You guys, I think, like I was just saying, tonight was probably one of the more impacting shows I've done because of the data and the fact that we know what's coming. We know what's coming, and we should know that what's coming is not good. And we need to really pay attention to this type of information. We got to really make sure we spread the word. Before I close, June 29th, next week, Wednesday, Dr. Jerome Kim will be on the show from the International Vaccine Institute. You all know Dr. Jerome Kim. Unfortunately, his time slot is from 2 to 3 p.m. So we're gonna do it live 2 and 3, and then we'll replay it on Wednesday night for those that cannot make it. But Dr. Jerome Kim has a lot of the updated information on vaccines. That is going to be one hell of a show. There's not much being said. I know there's a lot of speculation about what's being done and what's being worked on, but we heard from Dr. Kim next week, Wednesday, 2 o'clock p.m. to 3 o'clock p.m. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I just say this, guys. First of all, again, docs, thank you so much. There is nowhere else, and I don't say this to brag, right? This village was developed because of caring people like our good friends here, the two doctors tonight, and many others that decided that they would be willing to come on the show to share information that was important to keep our people safe. This is all they have. There is absolutely nowhere else you can go. But this information is useless if it's not in the hands of the people that need to hear them. So please, 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 I beg you, this show especially, please share it. We need to get this information. Yes, Meredith, super informative show tonight. I cannot agree more. These two people have dedicated their lives the last 2.5 years on this, and we're honored and just humbled that they're here. But again, they're preaching to the choir tonight. I don't think there's too many people on here that haven't heard this before. It's wonderful to hear the news that's coming, but if we don't get this out to the people that need to hear it, then it's us. It's a bunch of villagers that are shooting the bull, and we need more than that. We need this to get out. We see, this is how I look at it. If you share this out, or you share the information that you learned tonight with your friends at work tomorrow, and that person decides, damn, I better start wearing my mask again, we may save that person's life, or we may save a person that they may infect down the road. All right, this is serious stuff, and there's so much that we can do as a village to help. Old saying, it takes a village. Well, let it be this village, and let's go and make it happen, and let's share the crap out of this thing and share the information with everybody. All right, guys. Docs, thank you so much. Village, we love you guys. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you guys on Friday night. Have no idea what the heck we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about something. So with that, you folks, thank you all. Take care. God bless. Stay safe. We love you all.
Thank you, Mel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Aloha.